Hello, sweetheart. It's Rose, and I need to tell you something. Something that still sits heavy in my chest like smoke that hasn't cleared. The night my house burned to the ground, I stood barefoot in my neighbor's driveway, wearing nothing but my nightgown and the raincoat I'd grabbed from the back door. Flames roared through the roof of my little white house, the one with the green shutters, the one George and I had raised two boys in. It looked like the sky had cracked open and swallowed everything I ever loved. And when I called my son, shivering, soaked, teeth chattering, he answered on the third ring. Mom, what's going on? Are you okay? My house, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. It's gone, Daniel, everything. I'm standing here in a stranger's shoes. I don't know what to do. He was silent for a second too long. Then he said, Of course, come to us. Just give me a minute to check with Rachel. Rachel, his wife. My daughter-in-law of 8 years. She who liked things tasteful and elevated. She who flinched if my casserole dishes didn't match. But I told myself it was fine. Families adjust. That's what I'd always believed. 20 minutes later, he called back. I could tell by the way he cleared his throat that something had shifted. Mom, he said, Rachel's feeling overwhelmed. The kids have exams. The house is kind of chaotic right now. I blinked at the fire truck light still flashing across my street. Daniel, I said, I have nowhere to go. There was a long pause. She thinks it might not be the best time, he said finally, his voice tight, almost ashamed. Maybe just a hotel for tonight? I'll cover it, just for now. Just for now. My mouth went dry. I had raised him. I had nursed him through fevers and coached him through heartbreaks. I had picked up his messes for 38 years. And now, when all I had left was the purse in my hand and the smoke in my hair, my own son was offering me a hotel room like I was a business expense. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply said, I see. And then I hung up. I turned back toward the fire, watching the last of my curtains collapse into embers. My neighbor, sweet Miss Ellie, came over with a blanket and her house keys. You're welcome to stay as long as you need, she said, wrapping the blanket around my shoulders. It's just me and the cat. The spare room's clean. I nodded and I went. But I left something behind in that driveway, something deep and maternal and aching. It was the first time I truly understood that love isn't always enough, not when convenience costs more. I spent the night on a borrowed bed staring at the ceiling fan. I thought of George. He would have never left his mother outside. And then I thought of the time Rachel insisted on keeping the aesthetic of their guest room pristine, told me not to bring my floral nightgown because it clashed with the linens. I'd laughed then, but now it made sense. I was never meant to be part of their picture. The next morning, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror in Miss Ellie's guest room, washed my face with rose-scented soap, and asked myself one question. Where do I go when I'm no longer needed? The answer didn't come easy, but it was starting to form. And it would lead me somewhere my son never expected. Somewhere that would make him and Rachel very, very uncomfortable. That morning, I walked to the Red Cross shelter set up at the high school gymnasium. The folding chairs and hushed voices, the line for warm coffee, the kind-eyed volunteer with the clipboard. It all felt like a foreign movie I'd somehow been cast into, only I wasn't acting. This was real. This was my life now. They gave me a blanket and a voucher for 3 nights at a motel. Room 214. Thin walls. A view of a cracked parking lot. I lay on the stiff mattress that first afternoon, staring at the popcorn ceiling, thinking, this is what it feels like to be unwanted. Not just by fate, but by your own child. I didn't cry, not then. I kept thinking of what Daniel said, Rachel's overwhelmed. As if my grief, my loss, my literal homelessness was some inconvenient footnote in their week. He didn't even come to the site. Didn't bring the kids by to check on me. Didn't ask what I'd saved from the flames, because there was nothing. I had nothing, but I still had pride. On the second day, I called my cousin June. We hadn't spoken in years. Nothing bad, just time, distance, the usual fade of family ties. She lived 2 hours north in a little town called Wayland, ran a bed and breakfast out of an old farmhouse. When she heard my voice on the phone, she gasped. Rose? Oh, honey, I heard about the fire. I wasn't sure if it was your street. It was. You come here, she said, not even asking. Room three's open. The green one with the clawfoot tub. No charge, no limit. Just get here. You'll heal better with chickens clucking and fresh air. I smiled for the first time since the blaze. It was a shaky thing, but it held. Thank you, June, I said. I don't know what to say. Say you'll come by tomorrow. Say you'll bring that sass of yours and tell me all about that son of yours who apparently needs a damn reminder who raised him. The next morning, I packed what little I had into a donated canvas bag and boarded the northbound bus. I didn't tell Daniel I was going. I wanted to see how long it would take before he noticed I was gone. Wayland smelled like earth and pine and bread. June's house was the kind of place that calms your nerves on contact. A wraparound porch, crooked wooden steps, paint peeling just enough to feel charming. And that green room? It was heaven. Lace curtains, soft sheets, a bed that didn't pretend not to squeak when you lay down. She made tea. We sat on her back porch watching the chickens peck the lawn, and I told her everything. Rachel's tight smile, Daniel's careful avoidance, the hotel suggestion, the silence after. When I finished, June said nothing for a long time. Then she looked at me and said, "You know, honey, sometimes when people are drowning in their own lives, they'll push you under just to keep their heads above water." I nodded slowly. "And sometimes they just don't want to share the boat." She sighed, then poured more tea. "Well, it's your turn now, Rosie. You gave them everything. Time to give something back to yourself." So I stayed. Days turned into weeks. I helped with breakfast service in the mornings, read books on the porch in the afternoon, and let the peace of it all start to mend me. Still, Daniel didn't call. Rachel didn't write. I watched their lives from a distance. Rachel's posts about dinner parties, Daniel's firm reaching a new milestone, and in none of it was I mentioned. Not once. I could have vanished in the fire, and they'd just brushed off the ash. One morning, June walked in with the mail and handed me an envelope. A card from Daniel? I opened it with trembling fingers. It read, "Hope you're doing well. Rachel says hi. The kids are busy with school. Let us know if you need anything. Nothing about the fire, nothing about coming to visit. Not a hint of guilt or care. Let us know if you need anything, as if the obligation was mine." I folded the card carefully and tucked it into my sweater pocket. I didn't cry, but I knew then I wasn't going back. Not to that version of my life. Not to their conditional love. That night, June found me on the porch with a photo album in my lap. I was looking at a picture of Daniel at 10, missing front tooth, arms flung around me. His eyes were bright then, open, innocent. "I miss that boy," I said softly. "He's still in there somewhere," June replied, "but maybe it's time he missed you." She was right. It was time to pull back the love I had so freely given and let the silence speak for itself. But the silence didn't last. Because 2 weeks later, I got a phone call that would change everything. Rachel, her voice cold, brittle, like frost on glass. "Rose," she said, "we heard you're staying in Wayland. Daniel wants to talk. We'd like to come visit. Just a quick day trip." I could hear something behind the words. Not warmth, not concern, something else. And I wasn't sure yet what it was. But I was going to find out. And they weren't ready for what they'd find. Rachel wore linen like armor. She stepped out of their SUV with sunglasses too big for her face and a smile too thin to mean anything. Daniel followed behind her, hesitating just slightly before climbing the steps of June's porch. He looked older, tired. That pleased me in a way I wasn't proud of. "Rose," Rachel said, all gloss and grace, "you've really made a charming escape here. It's very rustic." June, who'd been sweeping the porch, glanced up and said without missing a beat, "Some of us don't need imported granite to be happy." Rachel blinked and looked away. Daniel cleared his throat. "Hi, Mom." I nodded. "Daniel." They didn't hug me. They didn't ask if I'd been sleeping well or if the nightmares had stopped. They didn't bring the children. Instead, Rachel launched straight into it. We thought it might be good to check in, she said, crossing her legs with practiced ease. The insurance adjuster's been calling us. Said you named Daniel as your emergency contact. There are decisions to be made. I knew that tone, that tight, clipped rhythm. Rachel was managing a problem, not visiting a mother in law. Well, I said slowly, I figured you'd be too overwhelmed to come to the fire itself. Nice of you to make the trip now that the smell's gone. Daniel flinched. Rachel didn't. We weren't sure what your plans were, she continued, ignoring the jab. We understand it's been hard, but the insurance payout is substantial. Enough to get you set up somewhere smaller, cozier. I looked at her, really looked. There it was. The real reason they came? The money. They weren't checking in on me. They were checking in on what I was going to do with what was left. Daniel jumped in, voice softer, coaxing. Mom, we want you to feel supported. Maybe something closer to town? Rachel even found a little condo in Milford with community activities and a shuttle. A shuttle? Like I was 85 and shrinking. June let out a snort from the doorway. Or, I said calmly, I could just rebuild on the old lot. There was a beat of silence. Rachel didn't blink, but her smile twitched. That neighborhood isn't really functional anymore, and there's the matter of upkeep. You'd be isolated. Isolated, I repeated. Unlike now when I'm surrounded by family. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. Mom, we're just trying to help. You've been through a trauma. Yes, I said, and the part that hurts most wasn't the fire. They didn't respond, because they knew. I stood up slowly, letting my joints protest so they could hear just how human I still was. I lost everything, Daniel. The wedding album, your father's letters, the blanket your grandmother knitted when you were born. But what scorched deepest was calling my son in the middle of the night and hearing him ask if I had my credit card on me. He looked at the floor. Rachel said, too brightly, let's not dwell. You're here now. That's what matters. No, I said. What matters is this. I'm not giving you a cent. That did it. Rachel blinked hard. Daniel looked up, startled. What? Mom, no one's asking for... You came here to steer the decision, I said, to make sure the money goes where it fits your plans. Don't be dramatic, Rachel snapped. We came because we care. Then where were you when I was sleeping in a motel with my socks in a plastic grocery bag? Daniel swallowed. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, I said. And then I pulled the envelope from my pocket. Here, I said, handing it to Daniel. That's the rebuild plan. I'm buying a prefab cottage. Small, clean, easy to maintain. June's neighbor does the installations. The payout covers everything. I don't need your permission. I don't need your input. Rachel opened her mouth, but I cut her off. And if either of you try to get involved in the paperwork, I'll make sure my attorney knows exactly who tried to pressure a woman fresh out of a fire into changing her will. Rachel's mouth snapped shut. Daniel looked stunned. You got a lawyer? I got two, I said. One for the property, one for the boundaries. The silence that followed was brittle as old china. June stepped out then, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Y'all staying for supper or just here to circle the wagon? Rachel stood. We have to get back. I nodded. Of course. Big lives. Busy schedules. It's not easy being overwhelmed. Daniel lingered. He looked at me, really looked, and I saw something flicker there. Regret maybe, shame. But I was too tired to collect his sorrow. As they walked to the car, I watched Rachel's back, the straight posture of someone who always thought she'd won. And just before she got in, she turned. You know, she said coldly, there's a difference between being independent and being ungrateful. I smiled. And there's a difference between being overwhelmed and being cruel. She shut the car door without another word. As they drove away, June joined me on the porch and handed me a glass of sweet tea. Well, she said, that was a whole casserole of passive aggression. I laughed then, really laughed, because it felt good to finally say the truth out loud. But the truth, as I would soon learn, wasn't done with me yet, because 3 days later, I received a letter that changed everything. And it wasn't from Daniel. The envelope was thick, cream colored, no return address. It had weight before I even opened it, like something that wasn't meant to be easy. I sat at the kitchen table in June's farmhouse, the mid morning light slanting in just right, and I peeled it open with slow fingers. A single page letter, a check clipped to the top. The handwriting stopped me cold. Neat. Looping. Familiar in a way I hadn't seen in nearly 2 decades. Dear Rose, it began. I read it twice before I let myself breathe. It was from Marion, my late husband's sister. We hadn't spoken since George's funeral, not really. There had been a coldness between us even before that, a slow growing root of something bitter neither of us pulled out in time. George had kept us apart in subtle, calculated ways. One of the many things I only began to see clearly after the smoke. But this letter, it was nothing like I expected. I heard about the fire, she wrote. I didn't reach out sooner because I wasn't sure if I had the right. I've been thinking about you, about the past, about George, about how easy it was to believe what we were told about you. I stopped there, letting those words settle into my chest like dust on an old photograph. What we were told about you, she went on. After he died, I found some of his files. I wasn't snooping. I was cleaning out the storage unit he kept in Santa Rosa. It was supposed to be full of tax records. Instead, it was full of notes, letters, pages and pages with your name at the top. I knew before she said it. I knew what she'd found because I had lived in its shadow for over 40 years. George hadn't just controlled me, he had documented me. There were medical logs, Marion wrote, as if you were a patient, not a wife. Notes on your moods, what you ate when you left the house. And he'd copied letters you'd written to friends, to me, even to the kids. It was all there. I was horrified. I pressed the page against my heart. My breath was shallow. My ears rang. It wasn't just me. It wasn't just in my house. George had archived my life in more than one place. His obsession with control spread wider than I'd known. I thought I'd found it all after he died. His office, the files, the instructions for Evelyn Grace, as he called them. But I hadn't even scratched the surface. He'd made backups. I don't know if this gives you peace or pain, she continued, but I needed you to know. You were never crazy. You were never what he made you out to be. And I'm sorry I believed him. That's when the tears came. Not loud, not dramatic, just soft and steady like rain on the porch roof. She enclosed a check. $10,000. No explanation. I didn't need one. It wasn't charity. It was something else. A peace offering. A reckoning. I folded the letter slowly and placed it back in the envelope. Later that evening, I sat with June in the parlor, the fire crackling low. I told her everything. About the files George kept. About the way he'd chipped away at me over the years until I questioned the ground beneath my feet. About Marion's letter. June didn't interrupt. Just listened. When I finished, she reached over and took my hand. You should show the letter to Daniel, she said. He doesn't know. I don't know if I want him to, I replied. I'm not sure he's earned that part of me. Maybe not, she said. But it's not about what he deserves. It's about what you need to set down. That letter, it's not just a note. It's a key. I thought about that all night, and the next morning I wrote a letter of my own. 3 pages, handwritten, no filter, no bitterness, just truth. The kind of truth that has been boiled down to its essence, stripped of drama, sharpened by decades of silence. I told Daniel about the office I wasn't allowed to enter, about the pills I didn't need, about how his father had rewritten my memory, edited my freedom, all with a surgeon's precision. I told him I wasn't broken. I'd been broken open. And I included a copy of Marion's letter. No commentary, just facts. Then I sealed the envelope and walked it down to the mailbox, boots crunching in the morning frost. 2 days later, he called. Not Rachel, just Daniel. His voice was hoarse. Mom, he said, I didn't know. I didn't know any of that. I didn't say anything. I always thought Dad was strict, but safe. I never imagined he could. You didn't want to imagine it, I said. That's different. He was quiet for a long time. I heard the shuffle of papers in the background. She found this after the fire? He asked. Why didn't she say something sooner? She probably thought the same thing I did, I said, that no one would believe her. Another silence, a heavier one. I'm so sorry, Mom. It was the first time he'd said it since the fire. I let the moment breathe. I don't want money, I said gently. I don't want visits out of obligation. I just want the truth to matter. It does, he said, his voice tight. It does now. I wasn't sure I believed him, but it was a start. And then, just when I thought I was finding ground again, another letter arrived. This one certified, official, stamped from a lawyer's office. Rachel had filed a motion. She wanted to challenge my competency. I didn't scream when I read the letter. Didn't slam anything or crumble to the floor. I just sat very still in the green room at June's, holding the thick envelope in my lap, feeling the familiar old tremor of disbelief. Not at what Rachel had done, but at how far people will go to silence what they cannot control. She was petitioning for a psychiatric evaluation, claiming erratic behavior, isolation, possible confusion after the traumatic fire. She had included statements, fabricated ones clearly, about my refusal to engage with family, my emotional instability, my inability to manage property decisions. Rachel wanted me declared unfit. I stared out the window, watching the trees sway in the wind, thinking, this is what it means to terrify someone simply by surviving. I hadn't fought. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't thrown a single thing. I had just stopped being quiet. And for women like Rachel, silence is something they expect in exchange for their conditional kindness. I called my lawyer. I gathered the letters, Marion's, my own. I brought every file from George's old office, including the documents he'd left behind, the instructions meant to manage me from beyond the grave. I brought witness statements from the fire, from the motel, from the shelter director, who still remembered how I'd sat quietly helping other survivors fill out their own insurance paperwork while waiting for my own fate. The court hearing was held on a Thursday. It rained. June came with me wearing a floral blouse she said was loud enough to keep the devils honest. When we arrived, Daniel was already there, alone. No Rachel. He stood when I walked in, and for the first time in a long time, he looked like the boy I used to know. The judge was a woman, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, with a tone like polished steel. She listened. She read everything. She asked questions that cut through Rachel's carefully filed claims like butter. And when it was my turn, I stood. I didn't plead. I didn't justify. I told the truth. I'm not confused, I said. I'm not unstable. I'm not angry. I'm awake. I lost everything in that fire, except my mind. I know exactly what I'm doing now. I know what was taken from me before the fire ever touched my walls. My voice was steady. My hands didn't shake. The judge ruled in my favor. Unfit? No, independent? Absolutely. Rachel didn't attend. She sent her lawyer, but Daniel stayed. After the ruling, he waited by the courthouse doors. Mom, he said quietly, she's gone. I looked at him. Gone where? She moved out, took the kids to her mother's, said she couldn't live with someone who chose loyalty to madness. Her words. I didn't ask him to come back. I didn't invite him into my new house, but I said, that was your decision to make. And this time, you made the right one. He looked so tired, so human. Can we start over? Start? No, I said gently, but we can begin from here. He nodded. I watched him walk away, lighter somehow, and I went home. Yes, home. My new little cottage, set just back from the old plot. It isn't fancy, it doesn't have Rachel's polish, but it has light. It has air, it has a garden I water every morning and tea I drink every night without fear of judgment. No one tells me what to wear. No one tells me who I am. Daniel visits on Sundays now, just him and the children. No apologies, no drama. Just a slow rebuilding of something that feels, finally, honest. We play card games. We bake. We sit in silence sometimes, and even that feels like progress. Last week, I caught my granddaughter looking at a framed photo of George and me from long ago. She asked, "Did you love him?" I thought for a long time. Yes, I said, but I lost myself in it. And love shouldn't cost you. She nodded as if she understood. Maybe she did. She's 17 and sharp as a tack. I hope she never forgets. And me? I don't need revenge. I don't need Rachel's apology. Her silence is enough. Her absence is enough. Sometimes the best justice is the life you build after someone else tried to burn it down. I sit on my porch now, the one I paid for myself, and watch the roses bloom. Yes, even in the aftermath of ash. I drink my tea hot. I smile when I feel like it. And I leave the porch light on, not for anyone else, but to remind myself I'm not lost anymore. I'm home.